Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk.
Hello, everyone. This is Roger Chen from Center for Business Studies and Innovation in Asia Pacific, University of San Francisco. Vera, I want to welcome you to our interview program. And would you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Roger. It's a real pleasure to join you on this podcast. My name is Veera. I'm from Sustainable Living Lab. We're a group of companies that basically deliver services around sustainability, consulting, and also all the adjacent sort of activities in that space. We've been around as a business for 14 years. We started out headquartered in Singapore. Today, we have offices in Indonesia, India, and the US, and we operate in about 30 countries. We have a staff strength of about 80 people delivering services in this space.
Using holding company/venture studio model to grow.
You mentioned about you are using the venture studio model, spin out the company. Could you elaborate this model, why you do this, how you do this? These are very interesting questions for a lot of people to learn from you.
Right. So I think the way we think about this is that first and foremost, for any kind of business that we do, we need to establish, right, when we start a new business. One thing we've realized in starting a new business that it takes about 3 years before a new business becomes stable, right? And we've arrived at this 2 to 3 years sort of window before a business becomes stable, right? So we looked at what actually happens in the 2 to 3 year window, right? What actually really happens, right? So what really happens is that in typical terms, you will initially find there's a particular kind of solution that you may have developed for a particular client, which may have worked successfully. And you find that you get maybe 2 or 3 more clients who seem to be interested in very similar sort of things, right? And you say, maybe what we did could be made a bit broader and made suitable for a category of customers and not just being very, very specific to a single customer, right? And so you look at how do you abstract that particular solution, right? And now once you abstracted it, what it means is that you got to figure out whether you have some kind of traction, right? And what traction means is that for the abstracted solution, are you able to find, 5 to 10 customers, right, that are willing to pay at a particular rate, which is profitable and allows us to justify expansion of their business into its own independent unit, right? And when we get to the point, which will take about 2 years, right? We get to the point, we said, okay, it's time to set up a separate company, right? Specializing in these new category of solutions and so on, right? And now the thing is that it is not a case of setting up the business and asking them to go do it on their own, because the whole beauty of this and the power and the strength of this is that they must be able to tap on the networks, capabilities, and the expertise of the parent and group companies. Because if what they are doing means that they're only working alone, then there is no benefit, right? It's just like setting up a new company from scratch.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to leverage anything, right? So we got to set it up such that there are sort of human links between the management of the new company and the management of the other companies. We got to make sure that they all know each other. They meet and discuss regularly. So there is a sort of a meeting of minds at the operational management level across the different companies, right? So I would say a lot of human systems or social systems need to be set up in order to facilitate that sort of culture, right? Where we see it as bringing the group forward. And, we have a lot of opportunity for cross-selling as well, right? So, when you're going to talk to the customer something else, you find that, hey, maybe another company in my group could benefit from it. So we have to also create incentive structures so that if company A basically generates a business lead for company B in the group, then there is a certain share of the profit, right? It basically accrues back to company A for doing that cross-selling activity, right? So people are incentivized, right, in fact, to do cross-selling. And also there is the culture that we create where the management teams are familiar with each other and develop their own relationships and friendships as well, right? Which basically engenders collaboration and trust. So I would say that the venture studio model, the magic of it really is in the social systems, that you have to set up, right, for it to work, rather than the business model itself. Because this model itself is essentially a sort of a startup accelerator type thing, right? Nothing too special or fantastic about it. But the fact is that it's all tied to a group, and you're essentially part of a club, and you're not going it alone, and you get both financial support, client support, right, and a lot of other sort of support from the group that enables you to be successful much more easily compared to doing it alone.
That's
And
interesting.
which is why our team members we promote into these CEO roles, we can always ask the question, right? Why don't they set up their own companies on their own? They say, no, it's so much easier to be part of the venture studio model, right? It's so much
Mm.
easier because you are set up for success.
Yeah.
And they very much prefer that compared to taking the risk of doing something totally on your own.
Right. So the question is actually for when you spin out, but legally and equity wise, they are independent company, right?
So the group may hold or usually holds a certain percentage of shares in
Mm.
the spin out. Right. Now, it
Mm.
may be a minority shareholder, it may be a majority shareholder. Usually, the model is that we are vesting schedule, right? So that over time, the parent company reduces its holdings
Mm.
in the spin-off, and that the CEO or the founding management team of that spin-off company, as they do better, they get a bigger and bigger share of the company. So there's incentive for them to really grow the business, right? Because they're going to benefit and partake in the growth story. So
Mm.
you're really going to align incentives over here. I mean, end of the day, it really comes down to that, right? I mean, yes, we work in the sustainability space. We kind of work in the impact space. That is true, but people are incentivized, financially as well, incentivized in terms of the kind of ownership that they have, and I think all these things come to play.
Actually, it's a related question. So maybe it's kind of backward question. Why not just like a mini US companies? You still put them inside the same company, except that particular unit or BU, you may call that, is getting bigger and bigger. Why that model, with like a bigger company, bigger BU model, does not fit with your situation? It's better
Yeah.
for you to spin them out to make us like an
Mm.
independent company. There's an equity share relationship with them.
Yeah. So the reason for this, I think is because of our interactions with our larger customers, right, and seeing how they operate. So a lot of the larger MNCs that we work with tend to operate, as you said, in that BU fashion, and we can see the problems with that, right? We can see the problems in terms of the silos. We can see the problems in terms
Mm.
of the kind of adverse competition they have within themselves, the politicking, right? I think we see all these things, right? And we are like, there's got to be a better way. Sometimes we think to ourselves, aren't they the same company? Like, why are they behaving in this way, right? They are all part of the same team, right? So it boggles our mind, right? Like why does corporate behave in that way? Right? So as we are becoming more corporate as well, right? I'm thinking there must be a better way of doing this, right? How do we, as we grow, let's say we grow 200, 300 people, right? Do we not fall into that trap and become that sort of a business, right? So we have to review and revisit, right? So, you know, for all you know, right? Maybe we speak 2, 3 years from now, we may abandon the venture studio model, right? Because we find that, we have new problems with that, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're always open to better and newer ways of doing things. The other thing I'll say is that um, if we are trying to build one big monolithic brand, then putting it all as BUs under a single company makes a lot of sense. But in our case, because you're working with governments and MNC partners and so on, oftentimes the work that we do is fairly white label. The partners that we work with don't necessarily want us to have a very visible presence because that detracts and distracts from the kind of work that we do. Remember, we're working on fairly sensitive issues, right? We're working
Mm.
on things like national security related stuff. We're working on stuff that has a lot of implications, right? So you kind of don't want to be seen as too monolithic and too big, right? Because otherwise, then you will fall into the trap of the larger consulting firms, right?
Yeah,
Like, why can they do some kinds of work and they can't do other kinds of work, right? So you end up just becoming like an Accenture or a McKinsey or
yeah.
TCS, right? And you fall into that trap. right? Where they're too big, and because they're too big, some partners or governments are not entirely willing to engage them because it might send certain signals, right, to the market or to the stakeholders, right? So because of the nature of the work that we're doing, I think it's beneficial for us right now to operate in this sort of slightly under the radar model, right? I mean, it's not like we're invisible. Obviously, people know about us, right? I mean, that's how we get clients, right? But we don't have to be one mega big brand, right? I think there's no need for that, at least at this stage, because I think it's more of a distraction for us at this stage rather than any real advantage.
So
But
in other
again, that
words,
might change over
actually,
time. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, these spin-off companies, they could use their different brand, different
exactly. They
names,
use a
right?
different brand, correct? Yeah.
Oh, I see. And also then for the headquarter, so for you, it's almost like you are doing the holding company. You don't have like well, maybe you have some small venture projects still incubating phase that under your headquarter,
Exactly,
right?
yes. So we basically incubate projects, and when they're ready, we spin it out. So today, yes, you're right. What I run is more of a holding company that incubates projects that are not mature enough in the cycle to be spun out yet.
Right. So here's the question. What is the criteria? What is the like a tipping point you follow? Say, hey, it's ready for this company to be an independent company. What are some of the indicators you kind of follow?
So, a few, right? So one is customer runway. Do you have a
Mm.
pipeline of customers? That's one. Number two is financial runway, right? Do you have at least 6 months of financial runway, right, to run the
Oh,
business, right? So 6 months is a pretty good indicator normally that you have your stuff together in general. So a 6 month runway and a pipeline of customers for at least 2 years is usually a pretty good indication that the business is solid, right?
mm.
And usually at that point in time, it's quite safe, I would say, right? Quite safe to look at seriously spinning them out.
So typically, actually, does it have to be profitable, break even?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, so I think because we are not a venture funded or that sort of a setup, uh, we have a very traditional way of looking at profit and loss and revenue, right? Business that are not profitable will be shut down.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Make
it's a very traditional sort of thinking, I would say. I mean, it sounds very obvious, but these days you have massive loss-making companies on listed on the stock market. So the world's gone crazy, right? but, but we tend to belong to the old school of thought where the business is not making money or losing money, right? And you are going on for 3 years losing money. It's time to pull the plug, right? And give it a clean death, right? So we do that all the
okay.
time. I mean, to be honest, for every one company that we actually spin out, we probably have about uh, uh 3 to 4 failed experiments, right? They didn't
Oh,
quite make it out, right?
oh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that we've tried hasn't really worked, and sometimes things are ahead of their time, right? So we sometimes revive projects because the market has shifted, something new has changed, and then suddenly now we're back in business again, right? So
Actually,
we yeah.
Vera, I can tell you, your assets, your knowledge, maybe I will ask the next question, is extremely valuable even for large companies to incubate, many small projects. Then when it's ready to spin out, maybe just these large companies, they have the ability to scale them up, right? And so when these people spin them out, let's say the leaders can basically hire their own people, right? Or they just bring these people along with them, right?
Correct, yeah. So they either bring them along or they hire. And usually the way it works is that the senior people who were sort of leading the project will become its new management team,
Yeah, yeah.
and they will get, of course, shares and a stake in the business. And then at a point in time, they have to hire their own second layer of people and
Oh,
team and so on, right? So there's a bit of that work, and because so we in a way try to centralize a few things. We try to centralize HR because one
mm.
of the things we always find is that poor hiring practices can hobble a company very early on, right? So we try to
Yeah.
centralize the hiring to make sure that whatever we've learned over 14 years of hiring, right, we continue to keep that knowledge and experience. So we hire the right kind of people, right? We also centralize, I would say, accounting as well, because if you make accounting and tax errors, the blowback is immense. I mean, you get IRS after you, in every country, the tax man is after you. I mean, we are in many countries as well, right? So the tax and all this is something we got to keep and stay totally on top of. So we sort of centralize that finance, admin, and HR sort of functions because that's sort of it has to be done, but I don't think it's critical to the growth of business. But it's critical in the sense that if you don't do it right, it can really drag your entire company down, right?
Yeah,
And
I
it's
can, I
something, yeah,
can,
yeah.
I can understand the accounting, the administrative support, but when you talk about HR, does that mean actually that, let's say if I'm the spin-off company CEO, I want to hire this person, but I need to get the approval from the headquarters. Is that correct or not correct?
So it's not so much approval, but rather a sort of a having the processes systems in place for vetting, for ensuring
Mm.
that the background checks are done properly. You know,
Oh,
and
okay.
you can't just hire somebody because they're your friend or somebody that you know, right? So I think at this level, right? I mean, yes, hiring friends or people that you know is helpful, but we have also seen, right, if you don't have the vetting process done independently, then you got to be blindsided, right? Because you're not able to see past, the drawbacks of the person. So, you know, I would say the CEOs of the spin-off companies don't necessarily view it as a disadvantage or like, oh my God, I got to get Veera or other management members. Gotta look at it. They sort of see as, I have a brain trust, right,
Oh,
of experienced CEOs, right, who can help me avoid mistakes, right? And
okay.
that's why I said having that culture and that trust and the relationship between the various management teams, right? It's very crucial, right? Because the minute they start seeing as, oh, you're preventing me from doing what I want to do, that's the beginning of the end.
Thank you for watching.